Welcome to Module 4, Part 2. In this section, we're going to discuss data-driven stories. Data-driven stories allow you to understand and visualize data and also to search for it. They allow you to tell unique stories. They function as watchdog. And by that I mean sometimes in displaying data you can sort of take sort of an investigative look at a certain topic and provide a certain level of oversight about something. It could be crime, it could be any number of things, but just think about like where you often see data points. Data also bridges statistics and storytelling, and it can provide context and clarity. So basically, data-driven stories come at a time when software for data crunching has become cheaper and more readily accessible to the masses, and that's sort of why we see a rise in data-driven stories in digital journalism. Right here is this is a story from the Miami Herald, and it's talking about the hunger strikes that have been happening at the Guantanamo prison. So you can look right here and see how they're using a graph. It's one example. You see a lot of graphs in data-driven journalism. There's some other additional graphs right here that you can see about whether youth will have a better life than their parents' generation or not. And you can also see to the right there's sort of a this breaks it down by country, so you can kind of see what that looks like. And again it goes back to the idea that you use labels, captions, and annotations in your graphs to illustrate a point and to tell that story. Right here, this comes from the Pew Research Center. This is showing remittances received by Latin American countries, and this was for last year. So this is a combination of data on a map and the countries that receive the most remittances. Obviously, that's Mexico. And this is remittances from the U.S. So you see how they displayed that in terms of billions of dollars. They just used shading, and they shaded the map appropriately to illustrate that. And they also used the notation so you can see exactly how much went back. For instance, in Brazil, you're looking at 2.8 billion. So just to kind of recap about data-driven stories, actually I want to go back real quick, not so much related to this story, but there are some sites that have come up online in the past year that heavily rely on data. There's 538.com, which was founded by Nate Silver. He sort of is a statistician. I don't think he has a PhD in statistics, but he has been doing this on the net for quite some time. And he sort of rose to prominence in the 2008 election, where he was looking at election outcomes. And basically, 538.com is an ESPN-backed website that is going to basically have a lot of data-driven stories, and it's going to be led by Nate Silver. Another site that has come up, it's actually an offshoot of the New York Times. It's called The Upshot, and the New York Times used to host 538, the 538 blog by Nate Silver, but they're replacing it with The Upshot, which is going to have policy and economic analysis that is going to emphasize a lot of data and the use of graphs. Vox.com is another website that was recently launched, and that comes from Ezra Klein, who kind of got his start as a blogger. Actually, when he was a student at UCLA, he's actually from Irvine, California, where UC Irvine is located, and most recently he was at the Washington Post, but he left the Washington Post to create Vox.com, which is supposed to be an explanatory site that's trying to make news more digestible and understandable. And he loves charts and graphs. So it's expected that this website, and it's already launched, Vox.com, is going to continue to have a lot of data-driven stories.